back.
We are back.
We are
Welcome back.
to the amateurs that are semi-professional.
So right before we started recording, Alex just says to me, "So I almost lost an eye the other day," and I
Did
said,
I?
"Shut up, let me hit record."
Yeah. This was terrifying. Okay, so for for other people that may have severe astigmatisms like I do, I have a type of contact lens that's called a scleral lens. So what it is it's a big glass piece essentially that covers my entire eye. So then the lens doesn't move or shift when I move my eyes. So like for playing baseball or really honestly just even driving. So if I wear glasses, the distance between the lens and my eye, the light will get distorted by my astigmatism just in that short distance. So I have these glass contacts. One of my biggest fears has been one of these breaking in my eye somehow. Huge fear. Keeps me up at night sometimes because I'm like, I will go blind because I'm using things to make me see. It's like hypocrisy at its finest because without them I'm useless, but with them I could also become useless. Um, do you do you think that's how like severe drug addicts feel? It's got to be, right? It's got to be the same
I
thing.
mean, maybe.
I don't know.
I'm not sure if we should compare severe drug addiction to corrective lenses, but I don't know. I mean, yeah, maybe.
I can't function without them, but with them I might die. You know, or I might go blind. I doubt I'd die. Well, I might die, but either way. So I'm mulching up leaves in my yard, right? So I'm using my mower. I'm mulching up leaves, and I've always made fun of guys who wear safety glasses when they mow the lawn because I'm like, you nerd, like just squint your eyes, like you know, whatever, right? And I always thought something would happen like in a sport or if like someone got tough when I was at like a, like at a bar or something and like, that kind of thing. I am mowing, a rock comes flying out of the bottom of my mower at 8 billion miles an hour. Like it has it has like a moisture stream behind it. It's coming so fast. It's vaporizing the air. Comes flying directly at my eye. I luckily, because of my elite genetics, I get my right eye closed just in time to protect myself. It hits on the top corner of my glass contact lens, shatters it. Glass shards all in my eye. So I'm playing real life Operation, getting glass shards out of my eye. So I pull out, there's like a big piece, pull that out. I start like manipulating my eyeball to get it out. I get all the pieces out, thank goodness. But I'll tell you what, man, that I'm thankful it was as scary as it was because if it wasn't, that would have hurt so damn bad. Like I think the fear of going blind superseded any type of pain that was present in my body.
Yeah.
So scary. It was so scary. I can't tell you how scary that was. That was since I ripped out my teeth on a clothesline. That is the scariest thing that's happened to me in a very long time. It was terrifying, but it's okay.
I don't miss contact lenses.
Yeah, you got
I had the laser surgery. I had like the rubber or whatever they are, the soft ones. I didn't have the like a hard contact lens, but I can remember a time once I was in high school and I was at like my friend's cabin and we were tubing. We were like riding the tube behind the boat and I got splashed in the face and I like closed my eye and I opened my eye and I was like, oh shit, I can't see out of my right eye, and I was like, my contact got splashed out, like fell out. I'm like, no big deal. I have extras. Like I'm gonna be blind for the duration of this boat trip, and then I'll get a new one when we get back. No big deal, right? We're on the boat for like 2 more hours, and I like blinked weird, and all of a sudden it like materialized out of the side of my eye, like it did, like my, it did. It was like. Oh, it's me. It's like a peek back around the corner. It's like, oh, it's me. Hey, it's your contact lens. I just took a trip back to your optic nerve to just see what's up back there. And I was like, oh my god, good thing that came out on its own. Like dude. I would have been, and it didn't hurt or anything, but it would have hurt eventually, I'm sure, right?
Oh my god. I've had, because of this astigmatism, I've had like every type of contact lens you can have. There were these ones I had that were these tiny little ones that would just cover like your pupil essentially. These little guys, like Chowder would be perfect for him. That
Mm-hmm.
freaking guy. What a good cat. And those, so I'm almost glad I went through that, because when I was going through that, a lot of times that little one would like skedaddle. It would just like scoot out to the side of my eye because it would like lose suction on the pupil, because it was just this tiny little contact, right? It didn't like actually go underneath my eyelid all the time. Sometimes I'd blink and they like pop out. People who wear those are maniacs. Those are the most uncomfortable thing. It's like having a piece of lint in your eye the entire time. Those lasted about a week with me, and I was like, Doc, we got to do something different. But
Yeah.
there's this weird collection point laterally in your eye. It's so strange. Like when all the shards were in my eye, like none of them stuck in the top or bottom. They all just kind of like drifted out to laterally. And I was like, okay, if I can get my fingers in there, I can get them out. Scary stuff, man.
Yeah.
It's just, and when we're younger, you think that your eyeball just, there's like your eye and then your brain. Like it's just like, thank goodness there's like a membrane behind your eye and there's like stuff holding it in place. Oh man, that was, so yeah, it was a nice Friday evening for me. Mulch and leaves, almost losing an eye, and then moving along.
Vision is crazy. I it's an area that I don't know much about, but I really want to know more about, is like the whole vision training, um, I guess, frontier of sports performance. I find it really interesting. You see the like eye tracking technology that they use for research purposes, and there's a lot of people that say like it can be trained, vision can be trained. Some people say it can't really be trained. Some people say it can be trained, but you have to be careful about like what you train it to, because relevant information is what's the most important thing, right? Like the ecological psychology evangelists would look at like your standard vision training stuff, and they would kind of probably say, well, it's not relevant information, so it's not going to translate, because you know how your brain interprets what it's seeing is just as important, or if not more important, than how your eyes can actually track and see and all that stuff. um, and if you're good at interacting with relevant information in your environment, then your eyes are going to naturally track that information better, etc. I don't know what I believe, because I think of it almost like I would think of a strength and conditioning program, right? If you take the marriage between ecological psychology and general strength and conditioning, then I would kind of use that as the analogy. Like if my eyes do not have the actual like capacity to track things quickly, or to focus, change their depth of focus or their field of vision very well, or if my like peripheral field of vision isn't very good, and let's assume for a second that that can be trained, then I'm just increasing the performance capacities of my visual perceptive system, which then will allow for more attunement to relevant information. Uh, I'm going to be able to attune myself to whatever the information is better, more effectively, faster. It's going to take less time to train that stuff if my eyes were working better, right? And it's just like it's like a duh in a sense. Like one kid, a college kid I trained, didn't really realize he needed glasses, went and got contact lenses, and his average jumped by 150 points. It's like, well, yeah, being able to see fucking helps, like, but
Hitting is hard,
but
yeah.
I it's a chicken or the egg kind of thing, a lot of times. And I don't know what I don't know. I'm very excited to hear, we got to get a couple others on the podcast who might know more about this. But I'm really excited to learn more about some of the like eye tracking stuff with neurological stimuli, and things like that. Because it's an interesting thing, and I see it, and I don't know as much about it. But I think it could be something that's really informative and useful for people like us.
I
what
totally
comes to
agree.
mind? Sorry, I'm monologuing.
Go.
Let it rip. Remember how
I'm gonna monologue later.
last year we were working with I don't think he'd mind, Logan. We were working with Logan.
Yeah.
and we were kind of looking at his head position when he was like rotating to go to the plate,
Mhm.
and we were like, "Hey,
Why are you looking at the
are
ground,
you
bro?
looking at the plate at all?" And he's like, "What?" And we're like, "What do you mean? Are you looking at the plate when you throw the ball?" He's like, "I don't know." Like, what? You don't know? And he's like, I don't know. And he's here, hang on, let me throw another one. And he like throws another one, and he's like, "No, I'm not looking at it at all. And we're like, "Yeah,
Special
you're looking
boy.
at the ground." And he's like, "That's weird." And we're like, "Yeah, that is weird. How the hell are you throwing a single strike?" And he's like, "I don't know." And so we tried. We're like, "Okay, well, you should probably look where you're throwing the ball, right? Like, we're pretty
Mhm.
sure."
Yeah.
Um, and it was so. Remember how hard it was for him to
Yeah.
look where he was throwing the ball, and
Mhm.
he got worse for a short period of time.
Mhm. I think
And
so.
and that makes no sense. Like, it should be immediately better, but it wasn't.
Well,
It wasn't immediately better.
I totally agree with you. I think that the ability to interact with as many variables as possible, to get as much information as possible, to give yourself like the best outcome in the situation you're in, or like, more information in is going to give you the best ability to process, or, like your processor can actually take the pieces and put it together and assemble the picture before you even get to the outcome. I think it's a really good learning tool because your eyes, like, what do we say? We use 10 to 15% of our brain or whatever it is. I think a lot of that synaptic tissue can be just because it's like we don't, because of how we function and because of like the things that we need. Like, I would argue that when we were more of a like predator prey society, vision had to be better because otherwise you die. Like I think it's the same thing as like orthodontia, but getting corrective teeth, like getting your teeth fixed. We're almost de-evolving, or we're moving away from the ability to actually have true visual acuity because it's really not necessary for a vast majority of humans.
I
It's
think
really
that's well
not.
put. I think
But
that's
the
because
the
you're rarely really looking at anything that isn't directly in front of you, and you're also usually spending the majority of your day looking at things that aren't very far away from you.
Mhm. And you're not trying to find things like minutia. You're not like in baseball we're trying to figure out, like, we're looking for a ball coming out above a hand versus underneath a hand versus if it's spinning sideways or over the top. And same thing is that even as a pitcher, you're trying to evaluate the profile of your pitch as it's going to the plate, the shape of it, like seeing shape
Mm-hmm.
as it moves away from you, seeing shape as it comes towards you. It's the same thing as like getting shot at with an arrow, where you're watching prey move or fly, like those kinds of things. Hi, buddy. Yes. But that idea the idea of that your visual acuity being trained can allow you to have more input, I think is totally valid. Now, can every processor take more input? Is it actually beneficial to get more stimuli? Like, is more information better for everybody? Probably not. I mean, if you're truly a predator, right? Like if you are, let's say you're evolved from something or someone or a line that was truly predatorial, right? Like your job is to go out and kill something. I don't think, if I had to guess, lions ain't looking that far out. They're hunting, right? But at the same time, it's the lion. It's not alert. It's not like, well, I shouldn't say that. It's not the one that's being preyed upon. I would argue that a prey, something that's prey. Once again, this is all supposition, but I would imagine that something that's prey needs to be have higher visual acuity because it needs to be identify things more often. It
Well,
needs to be able to
the
identify
in yeah,
more possible issues. Whereas if you're always the aggressor, you're like, oh, I see red, kill. It's a simpler. There are less moving pieces.
yeah, the field of vision is where that shows up in the animal kingdom. Um, Predatory animals have forward-facing eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Their field of vision is more narrow, and then prey animals have a tendency to have eyes kind of on the side of their head, so their field of vision is much wider.
Correct.
Like a
Yeah.
deer, it can't really truly look directly at you.
Mm-hmm.
Their field of vision is like 270 degrees,
Mm-hmm.
but if something's right in front of their face, that's like they're seeing it out of the corner of their eye almost,
Yeah.
which is a
Yeah.
really strange thing to think about, but it allows them to be able to see over they have almost like eyes in the back of their head.
Yeah.
But if you look at like, what comes to mind is like a northern pike or like a muskie, like a barracuda. their eyes are front facing and angled downward down their snout. It's like there's like
I'm coming to
grooves
get
even
you. Yeah.
where they see. And I think that's what's interesting about human beings' eyes is that we probably have the widest field of vision of any forward facing eyes in the animal kingdom. I don't know that for a fact, but our field of vision is really wide. It's 180 degrees.
Yeah.
But we also have the ability to see far in front of us and be able to, like, we have the ability to manipulate our focus, soft focus and hard focus and things like that. So I don't know, it's really interesting. And the like sensory interference that can happen, right? Like we all have this experience that we like kind of laugh about, but if I stop and think hard about it, I think it's like the weirdest, coolest thing ever. You're going somewhere and it's unfamiliar and you're like trying to find your turn or a place to park or something. So you turn the radio down so you can see better.
Yep.
Like, and we all like, haha, that's so stupid. I can't believe I do that. But we all do it because it does interfere. Right. And I think that, there's at max strength, when we do training sessions, there's with hitters, there's some strategy to making the environment literally like loud. And people are yelling and there's loud music and stuff, because if you can kind of literally see the ball against sensory resistance, you're going to be in good shape. Right. Yeah. And we try to make the environment, sometimes we make it stressful on purpose, because that's another sort of neurological resistance to being able to see. Right. And you can see it happening in novice athletes. Like you can literally watch it happen, where if they get stressed out, overwhelmed, and I want to say distracted, but that isn't exactly what it is. It's not distracted because they're focusing on what they're doing, but there's too much other sensory input, and it's like they can't see. It looks like, because they'll swing and miss in a way where you're like, what are you doing?
What's going on?
What are you swinging and missing at? But it's an interference effect that you're trying to train resilience to. And that will hopefully translate to when they go out on the field and there's stuff going on in the dugouts. Somebody's talking trash. Their dad's like, Billy, get your hands up. I paid all that money for lessons.
Paid all that money. What are you doing? Yeah.
He's not even doing it right. But that helps train that muscle to literally be able to see better in those environments. And I don't have a great explanation for that. It's maybe somebody out there does, and I just don't know it very well. But I have what I would call like anecdotal experience about it. Like I've seen it manifest itself in a lot of ways, and I find it really, really fascinating. It's cool.
I think it's a lot. The biggest thing is that 90% of our information comes from sight, with how we're built. So it's like any information is information that's going to just continue to add or detract from whatever your goal is. But I think, like, to bring it back to the original thing, I think visual training could totally be super beneficial, but I don't know if it's super beneficial for everybody. Like, I don't know if every processor can. It's just like anything. We've talked about this a million times on this podcast. Just because the premise of this could be very good doesn't mean you can apply it to everything. Like, doesn't mean you can, like, every single Johnny, Billy, Freddie, and Susan can benefit from it, because sometimes they might just not have the capability. Like, they might need to be a single focus athlete. Like, they might need to be to the point where they're like, when they're hitting, everything's silent. Like, their mindset needs to be that everything's silent and they're focusing on one thing. Whereas Johnny might be able to go up there and just like completely shut his brain off and hear and perceive everything. And that makes him a better hitter. So I think that some of it too is also like your mentality, your ability to be, like you said, more resilient, like having training in an environment like that. But also there are some people that just aren't as resilient. Like, they can't neurologically change the way that they perceive information in the brain. Like, they can't just shut it down and they can't open it up. They function at whatever wavelength they're at, and that's just how they are. And I don't know. Everybody's very different, but I would also like to talk to more people who have done more visual training, because I think it's another way that you can manipulate the CNS without having to like manipulate it. Like, you can do a lot of like visual based stuff that I think could garner a huge gain without really having to like manipulate the human, like your body as much without having to put as much stress on your actual system. So I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe we're wrong. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, well, it's possible.
That's the title of the podcast.
There's something we've talked about before that really just like echoes in my brain a lot, because you hear the rhetoric around like training the CNS, like there's the CNS as if it's like this tissue in your body that you can like train.
It's one thing,
and you are your CNS,
right?
Like that is that's you. There's no like I'm training my CNS and that's this like it's an organ that's that's everything that you are as a person, and your personality, your hopes, your dreams, your fears, your memories, your emotions, your interests, your likes and dislikes. That's your CNS. That's your brain and your nervous system. That's your brain is the part of your CNS, your central nervous system. Everything about you is housed in there.
Yep.
And I feel like people don't acknowledge that enough. I get the feeling that when coaches and trainers talk about the CNS, they're flippantly, it's hand wavy. It's hand wavy, like, oh yeah, we got to train the CNS. We're going to stimulate the CNS to be able to like move action potentials through the body a little bit faster. Like, first of all, a lot of that, they're really talking about the peripheral nervous system.
Yes.
They're not talking about the CNS. They're talking about the PNS, the peripheral nervous system, because that is the motor neurons that travel out to the extremities of the body and control all of the different tissues of the body and all of the voluntary motor control. The CNS is like, I'm so tired of people not acknowledging the magnitude of what you're really talking about.
I totally agree.
And people do acknowledge this fact, right? Like a person who's going through, say, a test. He's like is a student and he's studying for a challenging test. His CNS is going to be fatigued and tired, and that affects it because that's your brain. People acknowledge that, but they don't acknowledge the load that other things besides like intellectual challenge, like if a kid is worried about making the team, his outputs are going to change. If a kid got in a fight with his mom because he got grounded, that's going to affect his CNS, right? If a kid's going through puberty and he can't think about anything except girls, that's going to affect his CNS. Like his CNS, that's everything. That's everything. It's all like if you take the CNS out of the equation, you're a dead body.
Yeah,
you're a bag of meat. You're brain dead.
Very very well put. Very well put. I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more.
That's sort of I don't even know why I feel like I care about that so much, but it just seems like the orders of magnitude of how important that really is something that I think we all have to remind ourselves of all the time. It's always just like sort of bouncing around in my mind when I'm like looking at guys. I'm like, I need to train their CNS. I'm like, well, that's them, right?
Let me connect. Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. Megan and I talk about this all the time with like our clients. Like it's everything that causes pain is like we talked about in that first episode. It all comes back to like, what are you experiencing in life? Like, where are you at in life? How are things happening to you? It's the same reason Megan hurt her knee. We'd been working on the house endlessly. We'd been traveling, hadn't been training as hard, hadn't been sleeping as well. There's your 4 indicators right there. Boom. Oh. Fatigue. You're just down regulated, all of them. And then you go play and you probably didn't warm up like you'd like to. And you're, boom, torn ACL. Yeah. Simple as that. And it's like one of those things that you can't train I guess you could. You can train yourself extrinsically, right? Like you can take you can take situations and put your self into those situations and try to force adaptation, right? It's the same thing as like Navy SEALs, like almost drowning when they train, becoming comfortable with being on the edge of death. Like that's you want to talk about a CNS adaptation. That's a CNS adaptation. Not being able to breathe and being able to calm your mind and being like, okay, this is fine. I'm okay with this. But that's driven by your internal, like you said, your being. You're literally regulating your PNS with you. your existence. And I think that's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I think those things too. I think to get those kinds of adaptations, if you're really talking about, if we're talking about training your CNS, we are talking about changing the way that you function, period.
Mm-hmm.
Complete change. And that doesn't happen without extreme things. You don't just make a life change or make a habit change. Like, it's not how it works. It's like anything, 14 days or 28 days or 7 months to create a new habit. It's like you probably need to experience something absolutely awful to change that and how you perceive. It should be red on the road. How you perceive like your reality. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the biggest things. I think that I totally agree with that. Like the CNS, like training the CNS or what your CNS can evoke is your CNS drives the PNS, right? So like really you're training the PNS to try and get a response out of your brain to allow you to have a higher hit of like this neurotransmitter to trick your body back into thinking it's more okay than it was. That's the whole, that's all training is and all the adaptation is, right? It's like input, output, this, that, next thing, next thing, next thing, next thing. And you're just processing this information endlessly. And you're just hoping your brain continues to keep up as you go further and further down the path. And we're just like, oh, our brain will adapt. And it's like, well, yeah, we're lucky we're humans and our brains will adapt. Because guess what? If you were a lion, let's go back to the lion. If you're a lion and you took the lion and just dropped it in Prior Lake, guy's screwed. Screwed. He's not going to adapt. If you take a human, if you took me, if you took me and dropped me on Skid Row, 3 days, I'd know how to survive.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? I'd figure it out. Figure it out.
You said something in there I want to highlight. Driving CNS adaptation is literally changing who you are.
Mm-hmm.
You said your sense of self, I think is what you said.
Yeah.
Changing your CNS is literally adapting and changing your sense of self and who you literally change who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And that cannot be understated at any point. I think if you're going to be like coaching people or like trying to train for fitness or resilience, or if you're like a CEO and you're trying to be, a high performer, whatever it is, like that can't be ignored. So let's, I think that's a good place to wrap that topic.
Nice.